Welcome to Backchecking the Bolts. Backchecking the Bolts is your cup of coffee to get you the latest on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Join host Jason Linkus and the managing editor of Raw Charge, Justin Godfrey, as they break down the Lightning's most recent games and go beyond the highlights, telling you what the box scores didn't. It's time to drop the puck.
It is February 9th, 2026. Welcome to Backchecking the Bolts. Hi, I'm your host, Jason Linkus, and as always, I'm joined by the managing editor of Raw Charge. He's Justin Godfrey. Justin, how you doing, bud?
It's another beautiful winter day down here in sunny Dunedin, Florida. Beautiful high is 70 degrees. The sun was out all day.
What's sort of fitting, you guys are now back to your normal weather, but a week and a half ago when it was time for the Stadium Series, you guys had snow flurries in the area. So how are the Floridians dealing with the fact that weather's back to normal?
Oh, everyone's happy again. Back out on the beach, playing golf. I just got back actually from playing golf last week for a couple of days. But yeah, it's great to be back out enjoying what we do in the winter here down in Florida. How about you?
Now I'm back up in Pittsburgh. I'll be heading out to the Midwest. I'll be heading to Dallas all the way through Sioux Falls, South Dakota in a couple weeks. So getting ready for that trip and getting ready, honestly, for some Olympic hockey. And Justin, you and I were talking off the air, but the Lightning are well represented in the Olympics. A lot of these players have various roles within each team, but let's take a look. Let's dig a little deeper and talk about the various Lightning players who are playing. First of all, let's talk about the alternative captain for Slovakia. It's Erik Cernak.
So the Lightning's big Drago-looking defenseman is going to be playing a big role for Slovakia. Probably not one of your medal favorites, but they could be one of these teams that pulls off an upset. Just according to some of the early practice reports, it looks like he's on the second pairing right now. Probably going to be doing some penalty killing, but I definitely expect him to play quite a few minutes for them. I think the only one ahead of them on their roster right now is the young kid up in New Jersey, Simon Nemec. But yeah, I expect Cernak to be logging a lot of minutes in those early rounds for him.
Speaking of logging a lot of minutes, Jake Guentzel, the Lightning star forward playing for Team USA, is going to be playing along with Austin Matthews, and it looks like Matt Boldy at the very beginning of the Olympics. Guentzel's going to see extensive power play time. How do you think that line of Matthews, Boldy, and Guentzel will work together?
I think it's going to be pretty good. I mean, you got two extremely talented forwards in Matthews and Boldy. I know Austin Matthews has kind of been up and down this year, but he's probably still the best American player on the planet. So you're going to have him centering the line. Guentzel is just such a great adaptable player for different styles of play. You know, the Lightning fans have seen it all year long where he's either playing on the Kucherov line or he's playing with Brandon Hagel and Anthony Cirelli. He can just adapt and just play really well with his teammates. So he should fit right in. Like you mentioned, he's going to be on that power play. He loves to play out by the side of the net. He gets those deflections. For a guy who's seems like he's 5'10" and 150 pounds soaking wet, I don't know if there's a better net front player in the league. And when it comes to either swat net deflections or getting those rebounds, he just has a way to find those dirty goals. So I think he's going to be one of their keys. A lot of people are going to be focusing on Matthews, but Guentzel could be one of these guys that really just kind of pops out, scores a bunch of goals for USA when they need him to.
Guentzel's always had a propensity of scoring big goals in big games, ever since his rookie year when the Penguins won the Stanley Cup to the Four Nations tournament. Guentzel always shows up. Now, speaking of someone who always seems to show up, it's Victor Hedman for Sweden, and he's joined by fellow Lightning forward Pontus Holmberg. It's Victor Hedman again. He's basically anchoring that Swedish blue line.
It's kind of interesting to see him. He was down on the second pairing, at least on the preliminary practice kind of lines that I was looking at earlier today, which, you know, he is still coming back from an injury that's kept him out for the better part of 3 months. So it could be one of these where he starts down on the second pairing, then moves his way up. Probably see him with Rasmus Andersson at least to start, which Sweden, if you're looking for a dark horse team that's not the U.S. or Team Canada, I think they have a really good shot just based on their defensive depth and their goaltending. So Hedman's going to be a key part of that. As far as Holmberg, as of right now, probably going to be scratched early on. I think he's the extra forward just to start, but we talked about it last time we were out, just the type of dirty kind of defensive player he is, where he brings that valuable defensive role to a team. He could earn his way into the lineup as the tournament goes on, and they need a little bit more defensive depth. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, Hedman's going to be playing a lot of minutes. I expect him. I was kind of surprised he wasn't named the captain. He is one of the assistant captains. He knows this is his one shot at Olympic glory, so I think he's going to take it pretty serious, and you're going to see the best of Victor Hedman over the next couple of weeks.
The team that's probably the favorite in this tournament is Team Canada. And Brandon Hagel for the Lightning, well, it looks like he's going to be playing on the left wing side of that fourth line with Bo Horvat and Mark Stone. Are you a little bit surprised he dropped down to the fourth line of Team Canada?
It's just such a stacked roster right now that, that's probably where he's going to start. He is playing for Cooper. Cooper knows how valuable he is. Where does he end up? By game 3 or game 4, he could be up on the second line. He could be on the top line. I think it's right now Cooper's just going to kind of throw some stuff out there, especially in the early games, see how things go, and then adjust on the fly almost. Starting off, I saw Bo Horvath or Sam Reinhart possibly. Hagel's going to be out there killing penalties as well. He's going to end up getting his fair share of playing time. I think Cooper's going to rely on him, especially in crunch time situations. If it's close late, if he needs a goal, or if he needs to defend a goal, I think he's going to be out there on the ice quite a bit.
Now, what kind of role do you think Oliver Bjorkstrand will have for Denmark?
You're going to see him on probably the second line, I think, was last time I looked. He's definitely going to be a big key to their power play. Denmark's going to have to find ways to score goals if they're going to want to get out of the preliminary rounds and make a little noise in this tournament. And Bjorkstrand's got to be a big key of that. They're not the deepest team in the world. They are better than they have been in the past, and I think they're kind of one of these teams that the nations of hockey that's kind of on the rise here a little bit. Bjorkstrand could be a big part of that. What I'd like to see from him is just kind of keep the flow going. He started to pick things up with the Lightning towards the last couple of weeks, and kind of if he can keep that flow going, just get his own confidence going, I think. So if he scores a couple in this tournament, could carry over to when NHL starts back up.
The Swiss are in Group A, and they have a tough road as they have the Czechoslovakia and Canada both in Group A. J.J. Mosier, defenseman for the Swiss, where do you see him?
Honestly, selfishly as a Lightning fan, I hope he's out in the first round. I think of all the Lightning players competing in the tournament, he's the one that the Lightning probably need to get the most rest for. As disappointing as it would be to see them bounced early, I think Mosier getting a couple extra days of rest, maybe getting back to the U.S. a little bit sooner, would benefit the team down the stretch. That being said, again, he's going to be a key part of their defense. He's really had his breakout year this year. He's shown that he can lead a defense, be a number one defenseman. The Swiss are going to need that. I think they could be sneaky as well. You look at their rosters, a little more talent than you might think of off the top of your head, but Mosier's going to have a big part of that defense. But again, being selfish a little bit, I hope he plays a couple games and then comes on home.
What's the reason behind wanting him to get back a little bit earlier? Is it just because he's played so many minutes already this year, or he just hasn't been through that kind of a long ringer plus Olympic play? He just worried about those legs tiring out come playoff time?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, of all the defensemen on the Lightning, he's kind of been the one guy, the one steady that's been in the lineup the entire time. Outside of the 2-game suspension he had at the beginning of the season, he's been pretty much in every single game. Yeah, those minutes are going to start catching up to him. He's a guy that, he started his career in Arizona, played a lot for him, but it wasn't what I would call high pressure minutes. He got into it last year a little bit, was on that top line with Hedman playing on his offside. So he kind of got a little experience to it. He's just logged a ton of minutes this year. He's been their number one defenseman with Hedman and McDonough out. So you do want to see if you can get him a couple days here and there off, and then so he can be strong down the push when the Lightning have that big, heavy schedule going into March.
There's 2 other Lightning members who are on Olympic teams, Zegnas Girgensons for Latvia and Wojtek, you'll have to make sure I pronounce this right, Stakavoyov?
So close, my friend. Close, my friend.
That one.
Yeah, Wojtek Stakowiak. He's been playing. He was a free agent signing this year. He's been playing down in Syracuse. He actually had a really good training camp with the Lightning. A lot of fans think that he could be on that cusp of getting called up at some point. He's got that Lightning mold where he's a tough forechecker, plays responsible defensive hockey, has a little bit of offense to his life as well. He'll be playing for Team Germany. He does have the dual citizenship. He is Polish and German citizenship under his belt, but he does play for Team Germany. So he's going to have a chance to kind of, on that second or third line, make a little noise, make a name for him. One of the big things, one of the reasons the Lightning signed him is due to his international play. He had a really good World Championships last year. I think he had like 6 points in 7 games or something like that. That really put him on his radar. He's played for Team Germany quite a bit over the last few years. So he has that international experience. He's looking to add to his resume a little bit this year.
Final Olympic question, Justin. And I know my opinion on this, but I want to hear yours. I feel like it's the Olympics, but it's not quite the same without Russia there. The Russians have so much talent. They would be a front runner to at least medal in the Olympics. Does it feel odd for you that Russia's not there?
It is. You kind of had the same thing with the Four Nations face-off last year. Yes, it's an international tournament. Yes, it's best on best, but it's best on best with an asterisk. As long as Russia's not competing, it's not a true best on best tournament. It is what it is. We don't want to delve into politics too much here, but it's the decision IIHF and the Olympic Committee have made. So it's what we're dealing with. Lightning fans, it is a bit of a bonus because you do have Kucherov and Vasilevsky getting that 2.5-week break. But at the same time, it's a shame because I know they would love to be out there competing against their teammates, showing what they can do. Yeah, it's kind of a shame that they're not out there. We don't know what's going to happen for the next Olympics. It's still going to be a great tournament, even without them there. I think this is what NHL fans have been waiting for since 2014, 12 years or so, especially American hockey fans, because this is really been the golden age of American hockey as far as the stars in the league. And now they finally get a chance to represent themselves on the biggest stage in international hockey. So it should be a fun tournament.
You had mentioned the rest for Kucherov and Vasilevsky might be a big positive. Let's take a look at where they stand in respect to their quest to win the Hart and Vezina trophy. Now, the Hart trophy is for the league MVP. The Vezina is for the top goalie. Let's start first with Kucherov, who is probably one of the top 3 candidates for the Hart, along with Connor McDavid and Nathan MacKinnon. Justin, right now, where do you see him amongst those top 3 if they had to vote for it today?
I think recency bias kicking in. He's probably going to be your front runner. He did get off to kind of a slow start this year. He wasn't quite Kucherov-esque. I think he was only about a point a game, or just under a point a game for the first dozen or so games. And then just from the end of November through December and January, he's absolutely skyrocketed up the standings. Right now, he's sitting at 91 points. He's 5 back of Connor McDavid. Nathan MacKinnon sandwiched in between the two. So I think those are as has been the last 3 years or so, those are your top 3 front runners. It's always going to be Connor McDavid. He is the best player in hockey. As far as I'm concerned, there's no real argument to that. McKinnon's been as good as anybody can be over the last couple of years or so. And then you got Kucherov just piling up the points. He got named the star of the month for January. He put up 31 points in 1 month. And I think it's his fourth month of his career with 30 or plus points, which is pretty impressive. For Lightning fans, if you want to put that into perspective, the 1998-99 season, one of the great, horrible seasons in Lightning franchise history.
The Stéphane Richer years.
But you know who led the team in scoring that year?
I'm either going to say it was either Wendell Clark before he got traded or Darcy Tucker.
You got the names right. Wendell Clark was leading until he got traded. Tucker ended up passing him the last couple of weeks of the season with a whopping total for an entire 82-game season of 43 points.
Wow.
Yeah.
43
points.
Did they play 82 or 80 back then?
That was 82, I believe. It looked like it, if I remember, it was 82. They actually had a couple years where they played 84 games. They had a couple extra. I think that was like 96, 95.
Yeah, I think it was like 94, 95, 96 after they had the lockout.
Yep, they had those extra couple games in different venues. But yeah, it was 82 games, I believe, for Tucker, and he put up the 43 points. So, what Kuch has done over the last month or so has just been phenomenal. And it's a big part why the Lightning are winning. So I think he's going to get his name in the Hart consideration if he keeps this up, which I don't see any reason why he would stop. If anything else, he may keep it rolling just because Braden Point should be back after the playoffs when he has his running mate with him. Good things happen. He's just on one of those roles right now that he's averaging over 2 points a game for an entire month, which is amazing.
Justin, one of the dark horse candidates for the Hart is San Jose's forward Macklin Celebrini, 81 points, but he is the only one on that San Jose team that is scoring. It's all him, so that has to give him some credentials in terms of Hart voters.
Exactly. If this San Jose team somehow makes it into the playoffs, then I think, like you said, he's got to be one of your dark horse candidates. Your true definition of the most valuable player to his team. He's sitting at 81 points, like you mentioned, 28 goals, 53 assists. The second leading scorer on San Jose right now, Will Smith, sitting there with 39 points. So you're looking at, more than 40 points difference between the two. I think it's the biggest difference in the league. And then, Alex Wenberg's there at 37. You got a bunch of guys at 30s, but yeah, Celebrini has been the driving force for that entire team. If they can pull it off, then yeah, I think he's going to get some votes. Is it enough to unseat the heavy favorites? I don't know, but I think there's a really good conversation in regards to what your most valuable player is. Is he the most valuable player to your team? Is he the most valuable? Is he the best player in the league? That's always been kind of the discussion among MVP heart voters. So yeah, he'll definitely have his name thrown in the hat if they make it into the playoffs.
Now let's turn away from the heart. Let's talk about the Vezina. Andre Vasilevsky is the front runner for another Vezina trophy. Ilya Sorokin, though, for the Islanders has quietly had a great season. The Islanders are a surprise. They're in third place in the Atlantic. Justin, I think it's these two. Can you make a case for anyone else?
It'd be really hard. I mean, you may want to talk about Mackenzie Blackwood in Colorado. Jesper Wallstedt in Minnesota got off to that super hot start, but he's kind of cooled off a little bit. His numbers are a little more pedestrian. Vasilevsky, if he can keep this up for the next 2 months, I think he's going to run away with it, to tell you the truth. Not having Hellebuck up to his standards this year has really hurt. So some of the other ones, that's, Shesterkin in New York played well, but, his team in front of him is bad and it's only going to get worse. So his numbers aren't probably going to increase. So you're looking at right now, Vasilevsky, he's 920 save percentage right now, 211 goals against. He's got the 27 wins. I think he's your front runner just based on his last month of play. Sorokin's holding in there. And again, he's probably the only reason the Islanders can even think that they still have a shot at the playoffs. He's got the big 6 shutouts, which is always a gaudy stat for voters. So if he, gets another 2 or 3 and he's up to 8 or 9 shutouts, that's going to do really well for his case. But I think those are your top 2 contenders here at the Olympic break.
Justin, on February 7th over at Raw Charge, and for those of you at home, that's www.rawcharge.com, you published an article talking about the fine that Curtis Douglas had and the Jack Finley news. Let's talk about Douglas first. Gets a pretty hefty fine for what happened in that very interesting end of the Florida-Tampa game. What happened? Why did he get fined?
So you're looking at, it's basically one of these things where he drops a glove and his opponent did not. After the big fracas that led to a ton of penalty minutes, game misconducts, a couple of shifts later, Douglas is on the ice. Nico Mikkola with Florida's on the ice. And Nico is not, let's say he's taken some liberties with the Lightning in the past. He was the one that initially hit Kucherov that started off the whole brawl that led to the penalties, but he's also the one a couple games ago that sent the forearm shiver into Jake Gensel's head that touched off Jake Gensel dropping the gloves for the first time in his career. He's had some plays in their series in the past where they've been borderline. So Douglas goes after him. Niccolo doesn't drop the gloves at all. He kind of turtles up. You're always going to get the instigator fine on that, or as the NHL termed it, the aggressor fine. So
is that what it is now? It's the quote unquote aggressor.
I'm not quite sure what the difference between instigating and being the aggressor is, but that's what they nailed him with. So he was kicked out of the game. He has to cut the check to the Players Emergency Fund for $2,018.23, which, as we all know, is the maximum allowable fine by the CBA. $100,000 of that went to the organization. $25,000 of that went to Coach John Cooper, just for the lineup he put out. I think it was the final preseason game where Scott Sauberin was in the starting lineup. So it was one of those punishment kind of fines where, hey, we know what you're doing. You're not getting away with it. So, yeah, but it's just kind of impressive. Lightning fans will be quick to point out that the Florida's total is nowhere near that much in their fines. It is what it is. Douglas, he's a big guy. He knows his role on the team. He's a fighter. He's not out there to score goals. He's been willing to drop the gloves with just about anybody this year when he's been in the lineup. But I think he's still kind of learning that fine line of when to do it. I know on the radio broadcast, Phil Esposito went absolutely psycho, as he is wont to do. Didn't really agree with doing it at that point. One of the things people pointed out is the Lightning were down quite a few forwards at that time, just due to the fact that they were all in the box and or serving 10-minute misconducts. Right time, right idea, wrong time, wrong place to do it. But luckily, the series against the Panthers is over this year, so anything that'll happen probably happen in preseason next year.
The article also talked about Jack Finley. Finley, right after the Florida game, was claimed by the St. Louis Blues on waivers. How does that impact the Lightning? And tell us what happens when a player gets waived and claimed during the Olympic break.
So, Big Jack Finley, been prospect in the system for a little while here with the Lightning. He's a big guy, 6'5", I think. Drafted back in 2020. He was a second round pick, which for the Lightning is a pretty high draft pick. They've always liked his size. He does have a bit of a scoring touch, which he displayed in juniors and then with Syracuse for the last couple of years. This was his first year on the roster. They made a really concerted effort that he was going to be on this team this year. They were hoping he could provide some depth down the middle of the ice, provide that size, win some faceoffs for him. It's kind of been hit or miss. He's only appeared in 22 games. It's been a healthy scratch a ton of times this year, so he hasn't quite kind of kicked in what they thought he was going to. He is still just 23 years old. He's still rather young. He placed fourth, I believe, in our top 25 under 25 countdown that we did earlier this year. So he was kind of ranked up, for a Lightning prospect group that isn't that deep. He was ranked pretty high by our fans who did the voting in that countdown. So it is kind of a shame that they tried to slip him through waivers. He didn't make it through. St. Louis, who has some openings on their forward due to injuries and a couple of the trades they made, have some room. He's going back home. He was born in St. Louis. His dad played there. So it is kind of a homecoming for him. Hey, in regards to what you mentioned about how the waiver wire process works during the Olympic break, while it is a roster freeze, waivers is still in order. So that's why St. Louis was able to claim him. One of the little side issues is he doesn't actually have to report until February 17th. So it's not like he's going to be probably in danger of getting sent down to their AHL franchise. I do believe he is going to play in St. Louis once he reports there and once the season gets back underway.
I reached out to Jim Thomas, who covered the Blues for years, spent 48 years at the Post-Dispatch. I asked him, I said, where does Finley fit in on St. Louis? Basically, Jim told me, he said, hey, I think this is a depth move heading into the deadline. The Blues are going to get some injured players back. That's going to push them over that 23-man roster limit. So there's going to be some adjustments after the Olympic break. But this is going to be Finley's chance to make an impression over the remainder of the season to see if he can fit into maybe that bottom six role, probably on the fourth line. Appreciate Jim doing that. If you have a chance, check out his new book. It's called The Franchise, The St. Louis Blues. If you think the Lightning have some stories, the Blues have some stories of their own. That book's available on Amazon. You can find Jim, JTHOM1 on Twitter. Justin, the one story that I remember, and I lived in St. Louis from 1981 to 1983. In 1983, the Blues were sold to an owner who was going to move them to Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, not even the largest city in Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, because there was a dispute between the NHL and the Ralston Purina Company who owned the Blues. The Blues were not allowed to draft anybody in the 1983 draft.
People criticize the NHL now. I think don't think they have any idea what things were like, even 20 years ago. This league it's entertaining. It's a wildly entertaining league. The Lightning have their own stories. I mean, we kind of talked about it off air a little bit, from, Art Williams owning the team to their origins. Phil Esposito's great line of, I said hockey, they thought I said sake, and they agreed to buying us. And then, so it's, the Japanese ownership group that may or may not have had ties to the Yakuza. Nobody knew who the owner was. The hockey in the 80s and 90s, early 90s was something else, especially in the NHL. So, books like that are always entertaining to read when you read some of these stories about franchises. The way organizations are run these days, almost like corporations. You can't believe stuff people used to get away with in this league.
As someone who travels to Saskatchewan, and I travel there twice a year, I could never imagine an NHL team in Saskatoon.
Yeah, that's you think Arizona had problems drawing attendance. I mean, you could have the entire town of Saskatoon go in and they'd still finish 15th in standings as far as attendance. So yeah, it would have been interesting, but if any league was going to do it, it would be the NHL.
The one thing I will say, when I lived in St. Louis, they always had great support. Even back in the day playing at the old Checker Dome, which was a horrible building. That building was decrepit. We could talk another episode about stories from attending the Checker Dome. Again, I appreciate Jim's insight, and I look forward to reading that book. Now, for those of you who don't know Justin and I think that's the majority of people who are listening to this podcast, we are travelers. I'm one of those business travelers who's on the road constantly. Justin and I have taken a ton of hockey road trips. But because Jack Finley's going to St. Louis, we're going to do a quick preview of traveling with the Bolts, and we're going to pick for our first city, the gateway to the Arch City, St. Louis. Justin, I know you've been there for baseball. I've been there for hockey numerous times. If I remember right, you took the train there from Chicago, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I was living in Chicago at the time. Took the train down for, God, I want to say it was a St. Louis, Minnesota game, maybe. I can't quite remember. I was trying to dig through the old ticket collection to see if I could find it and couldn't come up with it. But yeah, it was a nice little, I think, 5.5 hour train ride from Chicago. The beautiful thing about St. Louis is where their train station is. You can literally walk to the arena. You can get dropped off, walk over to the arena. There's a couple of hotels in the area. Same with the baseball stadium, which, I did that as well. One year, walked down and just got out, jumped off the train, walked a few blocks, and you're right where all the action is in regards to sports.
One thing, if you're flying into St. Louis, it's not a city that's a hub. Now, from Florida, you can probably go there direct. You can go to Florida pretty much everywhere direct. But if you're living in other parts of the country, it's not the easiest city in the world to get to. Back in the day, it used to be a TWA hub, but they are sort of like many cities, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, other cities that have lost their hub status. It's not the easiest city to fly into. Now, renting a car there, if you've ever seen the movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, there's the one scene where Neil Page takes this shuttle to nowhere. They drop him off. There's no car, and he has to walk back to Lambert Field. Renting a car in St. Louis is a pain. I hate doing it for work. There is a train that you can take from the airport. It takes you right to Union Station, as you mentioned. That's always an option. Renting a car there, not the best. The arena itself, though, I don't know about what your thoughts were. I thought the upper deck was tight. I'm 6'2". I'm not a small guy. The upper deck was tight. The lower bowl was much more comfortable, but overall, good sightlines.
Yeah, I think that's what it kind of gets praised for, is that there's not really a bad seat in the house. The arena is 30 years old. It was built in 94, or it opened in 94, I should say. So it kind of has some of those aspects to older buildings that fans may or may not be used to. Some of the seats can be tighter. The stairs could be a little steeper than what they're used to. I just pulled up The Athletic. They just released their arena rankings for this year with the NHL, and Enterprise Center came in right in the middle, 15th. And the first quote they have is, "It is perfect. It is perfectly adequate," which I think kind of sums it up a little bit. I mean, I just remember going there. It's a fine building. It's great. Was it that super memorable? Not really. I thought the fans were great. They were really into the game. It was a fairly noisy building when St. Louis was playing. And I think, God, I want to say it was like a Wednesday or Thursday game. It wasn't a weekend game that I went to. So it was kind of middle of the week, middle of the season, and had a really good crowd, and the fans were into it. Knowledgeable, nice. I wasn't wearing any St. Louis Blues gear. I didn't have any issues or anything like that. So I just remembered it, and I think a perfectly adequate sporting venue. Enjoyed it there. Nothing food-wise or beverage-wise really stood out, but it was a good experience. Had a good time, and like I said, it's just, if you're traveling in, it's pretty conveniently located to the downtown area.
Now, I lived in St. Louis for a little bit, so one of the things I always knew living there, there's an appetizer called toasted ravioli, and it's been a St. Louis tradition for years. It's something you don't see in many cities. You got to try it if you're there. There's a couple restaurants that I would try. They're over in the suburb of Olivet, probably about a 15-minute drive from downtown. 5-star burgers, get the breakfast burger. My wife is the one who found that. It's highly recommended. Tremendous. If you've ever watched Cupcake Wars, which my wife is a big Food Network fan, Jilly's, those cupcakes are awesome. They really are. Two of my favorites, if you like random places to see, there's a Chuck Berry statue just west of town. Because remember, Chuck Berry, I didn't realize this, was a St. Louis native.
Well, there you go. Famous St. Louis native. Yeah. So, I think I didn't do too much exploring when I was there. It was mostly just in for the games and then straight out. But I do remember walking around. Unfortunately, when I went, probably their highlight, the thing they're best known for as far as monuments, the Gateway Arch, it was closed for repair when I was down there. So I didn't get a chance to go up into it, but I think it's one of those, if you're in the area and you get the chance, it's a one-of-a-kind kind of destination. So you definitely got to try that out.
Every kid who went to school in St. Louis, they took a field trip to the Gateway Arch, 630 feet all the way to the top. I just remember in vacation as they're crossing the Mississippi, hey kids, that's a St. Louis Arch, 630 feet to the top, and there's an elevator that takes you there. Can we go in it, Dad? No. I'm surprised you didn't go on the Anheuser-Busch tour.
Yeah, again, didn't have a lot of time down there. Probably if I was to do it again, I would be on there. I did go to Milwaukee just to go to the Pabst House, so been known to take a beer tour or two. Again, I'll do it over again if I find myself back out there. Would definitely hit that. They have a National Blues Museum as well, so I'd probably check that out. And I'm always a sucker for a good art museum, so all of that stuff. Kind of, you may have to catch an Uber to go out to it if you're staying downtown, but probably be worth it. It's a nice destination if you wanted to couple it with, Chicago or something else in the Midwest. Again, I would fly into St. Louis, take the train up to Chicago and fly back from there. It's just a good way. I think train travel in this country is severely underrated, especially out in the Midwest. So highly recommend it.
It's about a 5-hour drive from St. Louis to Chicago, right up to I-55.
And the train trip itself isn't much longer. I think one time was 5.5 and the other time was 6. One thing I did learn heading back from St. Louis to Chicago is that after 5 p.m., commuter trains no longer have the right of way on tracks. So freight trains do. So you will sit and wait every once in a while, which was always kind of interesting on the way back. There you go, guys. Not only hockey, but train facts here on this podcast as well.
One other real quick story about St. Louis. I mentioned the Anheuser-Busch tour. Back in the day, Busch Stadium, where the St. Louis Cardinals played baseball, that's now been renovated. It's still Busch Stadium. August Busch, who was the owner of Budweiser, wanted to name it Budweiser Stadium. Well, Major League Baseball said, you can't name your stadium after an alcoholic beverage. So he said, fine, I'll name it Busch after myself. What did he do next? He created Busch Beer. He said, you know what, MLB owners, take that.
Again, sports back in the day, man, you could get away with anything.
Well, that is today's episode. You can follow Justin on Blue Sky. You can also read his articles on Raw Charge at www.rawcharge.com. This podcast is available on all platforms that you can think of: Apple, Spotify, Deezer, Amazon, even iHeartRadio. We're on them all. You can find us on Instagram at backchecking_the_bolts. You can also follow me on Twitter at Linkus25. For Justin Godfrey, I'm Jason Linkus. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back later this week.